Hello, I'm May and I've been a Christian for about 36 years. This is just a little part of my story of what we've gone through. In those years things have not been easy, but about 5.5 years ago my life was turned upside down drastically when I went to the doctors with my husband, and the doctor had examined him and said they wanted him to go to Russell's Hall straight away. They were going to phone up. They phoned up, we went down to Russell's Hall, we saw a specialist down there, and within the matter of 2 hours from coming from home to being in Russell's Hall Hospital to be told that my husband had bowel cancer, and it was quite a large tumour there. At that point we were in total shock. We came out there, and to be honest, I don't think either one of us knew what to say, what to do. We were just quiet all the way home. We got home, and as I was walking up the road I bumped into my daughter coming out of school, because she works at the school, and she just looked at us, and without saying a word she knew, and she just ran off crying. Well, we got into the house and we started to talk, and Cyril just said to me, I've got to trust God in this. There's no one else. We've got to totally trust on God in this. Within a few weeks we saw a specialist. He had a biopsy and whatever, and then they told us that the cancer he got was a very aggressive one, and they got to treat it aggressively. So they arranged for us to have chemotherapy and radiotherapy together, and at that time they told us how harsh it was going to be, but we've got to go to Wolverhampton for this. And at the time I said to Cyril, how on earth are we going to get to Wolverhampton every single day for this chemotherapy and radiotherapy? But you know, God knew our need, and he placed it upon Rosalie's heart to take us. She came to me and she said, May, whatever you need, wherever you've got to go, I will take you. And I says, Rosalie, this is 30 sessions and it's every day apart from weekends. She says, it doesn't matter, I'm here for you. And I thought, thank God for that, because I just don't know how we were going to cope. Well, we were started to go there, and he was having the radiotherapy and the chemotherapy. But every time he went, everybody used to look at him and say, you know, how happy he was. He went in smiling, he came out smiling. But deep down in my heart, although I was putting a face on, I was broken inside, just watching him go through what he had to go through. Sorry. After all that, they shrunk the tumour, and it was hard, but then he ended up having the operation to remove it, which they removed the tumour, and it was a big operation. Me and Rosalie was at the hospital, and they said it was just going to be 4 hours, and it ended up, it was 8.5 hours, the operation. And we went up the stairs outside the theatre, and we says, is Cyril still down theatre? And they says, oh no, he's in recovery. And I was crying at the time. They said, but he's come out and he's actually praising the Lord. He's come from the anaesthetic praising the Lord. I couldn't believe it. I ended up from crying to laughing, me and Rosalie hugging one another. And then they brought him through, and he ended up in the HDU unit. 2 days after us rejoicing that this tumour had been took away and everything else, everything fell apart. He was took quite ill. They phoned me to go down. I went down. They'd rushed him back into theatre and said he was in a critical condition. That septicemia had set in, and it was completely poisoning his blood system. He came out of there and he ended up on a life support machine, and they told us that night that they didn't think he would pull through. Pastor Willie came at the time and he prayed for him and he anointed him. But you know, God knew different. He came through it, he came out, and he was praising God. And the first things he said to me after he came off the life support machine, May, I know God's real. I've seen him face to face, but he's told me I've got to come back. It's not my time yet. And he was in hospital for 4.5 months. Anyway, he came home, and I looked after him at home, and we was going and having checkups and everything was fine. And then one checkup, they said he was in remission. We came out singing and laughing. Rosalie was still with us at this time, had still gone with us through everything. She'd gone with us. And 2 weeks after that, he had another lump come. We went back to be told he was terminal. But how many times he was put in and out of hospital, I just cannot tell you. It was unbelievable. But you know, through it all, God was there. He kept us, he sustained us through it all. And Cyril kept saying to me, trust in the Lord, you know. And every time I said anything negative, I've been a Christian a lot longer than him, he'd say, I could tell Rosalie, tell her off. You know, he was positive all the way through. But in that time, he grew so close to God, it was unbelievable. I could actually see him walking hand in hand with the Lord every day. And he used to worship at the top of his voice. People that knew Cyril knew he was a fantastic singer. And when he worshipped God, he worshipped from the depth of inside of himself. And it would come and it would show. And no matter how much pain he was in church, he still stood up and he still worshipped. He wouldn't sit down. He says, no, I'm standing up to worship my God. And he went and he did it and he prayed. But there came a time when they said to us, there was nothing else they could do. And they wanted to put Cyril into a hospice. And he looked at me and he says, please don't put me in there. And I says, no, I'm going to take you home. I brought him home and I looked after him at home. And believe me, it was hard, because he'd been left with a big open tummy, which could never be closed up. And he had to have a vax machine on. And if anybody knows anything about a vax machine, it has to be airtight. And some nights, the machine would start bleeping, and that meant that the air was going in. And I used to have to phone district nurses in the middle of the night, and I used to have to come out and redo this machine, to the point that I learned to do it myself. And I used to do it myself and clean it myself. And even the district nurses said they didn't know how I was doing it. But I used to say to them, I know how I'm doing it. The Lord is my strength. And he's taught me everything I need to know. And they used to look at me and they just couldn't believe it. But you know, we used to witness to them district nurses every time they come in. And they knew by us and by Cyril the faith that we got. Well, time went on and Cyril said to me, May, I don't believe I'm going to be healed here. I believe I'm going to be healed when I'm in heaven. So just remember, if I don't get healed here, I am healed in heaven. And he took such a lot of courage from a little lad who used to come to this church. He was named James, and it was Jewish son. And they grew so close together, because they both had cancer, even in different age group as they was. They grew so close together. And he used to talk about James and the courage that James had. And he used to say, you know, that lad learnt me so much. And the day that he was passed away, I can always remember he was singing Majesty, Worship His Majesty. Pastor Joe was there and he heard him. And he never stopped singing that chorus all morning. And then he said to me, there was angels all in the bedroom. And I went in and I says, oh, I can see him. Even though I couldn't actually see him, I said to him I could, but I could feel him. And he said to me, just give me a wash and a clean. And I give him a wash and a clean and everything else. And I held him in my arms and he just looked up to me. And he said, Bab, never lose your faith. Keep trusting no matter what happens. And just remember, I love you no matter where I am, I love you. And at that point he shut his eyes. And the smile that came upon his face was absolutely unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I managed to pick my mobile up, which was on the side. And I found the paramedics. They came and they said there was still a faint heartbeat. And they were going to try and fetch him back, and I just looked at them and I says, please don't. And I says, well, he hasn't left a letter saying any different. But you know, as soon as they got them things and they went to put him on him, Cyril knew, and he wasn't going to let them bring him back. Not this time. He knew where he wanted to be. And he just went into the presence of God. And you know, I saw the presence of God in that room and in that house that day that I've never seen it before. And I just want to say to anybody, if they've got no belief, then they need to believe, because God is your strength. It says in Isaiah, those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. And believe me, I know what it is to have to wait upon God and have to renew your strength. And even though I walked around with a smile upon my face after all this, inside I was broken in 1,000 pieces. Nobody will never know how I felt. I was angry, I was frustrated and everything. But the words Cyril said to me kept coming back. And then I went away on holiday, which I hadn't never been, but I went to Spain with some friends. They took me into this little church as soon as I got there, and I've never experienced nothing like this. The church, if I could have seen heaven, that was what it was like. And I went in, I lit a candle for Cyril. I went to the front and I just knelt there, and I don't know how long I was there, but I had such a heat come all over me. And you know, the Lord just removed everything and just replaced it with peace. A peace that I can never tell anybody. And from that day I have a peace within my soul. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, one day I will meet Cyril again, and that will be when he decides to take me. And that's a little part of my story. And I just want to thank everybody for how they've been and how they've looked after me since I've been on my own. Thank you.